Most welcome everyone on this webinar on research integrity and research ethics, named Fake Journals, Fake Papers, Fake Citations. Sonia Bielobaba is senior lecturer and William Bilond is also senior lecturer, and they are both at Center for Research Ethics and Bioethics at Uppsala University. Without further ado, I give the floor to Sonia and William.
Thank you all for coming here. So today we are going to talk about fake journals, fake papers, and fake citations, and how to navigate a publication landscape that has become very risky, because it has become harder to know what to cite, what to read. So with you today, as Niklas said, it's me and William, and he will join us in a few minutes. But why have we decided to do this? It's because, as we all know, we have a system where bibliometric data steals the funding, and it puts quite a lot of pressure both on an individual researcher but also on the department, basically, because we all get money based and careers based on the publications nowadays. And we have a system that's, as you all know, called publish or perish, and it has led to some very unfortunate structures as well, because a lot of people are trying to game the system, and gaming can be done in quite different ways. In this paper, The Dark Side of Academics Emerging Issues in the Gaming and Manipulation of Metrics in Higher Education, Oravec argues that academia's growing focus on metrics such as citations, ranking, the H index, it has created a very strong incentive for researchers, but also for universities, to game the system. And we have some practices such as coercive citation, ghostwriting, fake documents, inflated authorship. And these are not just an individual ethical failure. It is a symptom of a very competitive academic culture that is driven by prestige and performances that are measured in different ways. And this obsession with metrics is risking to undermine academic integrity and research ethics, and shift away our attention basically from what research is all about. So if we start with fake journals, I mean, you all receive emails, I suppose, every day. This is one of those emails I have received. Publish your paper within 3 days. Date of notification of acceptance within 2 days. Date of publication within 2 days after completion of all formalities. And I assume that formalities means money in this case. So how can we have all these fake journals? Well, once upon a time, we had a system where you would send a manuscript to a publisher, and they would send it to a peer review, and when it is accepted, they would eventually publish it in a journal, in a physical journal, and then sell it to libraries and to readers. So basically, reader was paying for the access. And when the internet came, articles were put behind a paywall, so readers would still pay an access. And in Sweden, we are very, we have access to everything. And if we don't, we just send an email to a library and they buy it for us. It doesn't work like that for all other countries. A lot of research is behind a paywall and inaccessible. So people were like, okay, what can we do? Can we have some other models so that research is published and everyone has access to it? And then open access emerged. But someone still needs to pay. It goes through peer review, everything is accepted on the same way, but it is published online directly so everyone can read it. But someone still needs to pay for the cost. And then the system became that the authors are paying for the publication cost. So open access is basically a really great system. It's very democratic. It's very effective model for science publications. Everyone can read research And now when we have a research more and more global, it's very important that everyone has access to it. However, as soon as open access emerged, some unethical practices emerged because some unserious, not so serious publishers realized there's money in it and we can make some money out of it. So William, tell us more about it.
No, exactly. We'll stay with the fake journals for a while. And fake journals, when I first encountered this problem was 15 years ago. And then I think the term predatory publishing was sort of quite accurate, because it was sort of like a phishing activity where someone invites you and lure in a victim. As I will explain shortly, things changes a bit. It's not always such that it's a predator and a victim, because some people do, however, deliberately publish with these journals as well. So it's sort of a system where everyone sort of, there is a customer and there's a supplier, but what sort of brought attention to the whole issue of predatory publishers or fake journals was Jeffrey Bell, who was a librarian at University of Colorado. He started investigating these things, open access journals, in about 2008, and created a list that is still referred to as the Bell's list of predatory publishers. And this is something that got quite a bit of attention when it was sort of acknowledged in Nature around 2013. So quite a lot of public awareness around the whole list emerged. It was a quite useful list, because if you didn't know, or if you were unsure whether a particular journal was legitimate or not, you could at least consult this list. But of course, having one's name put on the list is not a good thing. So some of the people who had their names on the list, they raised legal threats to Jeffrey, and meaning that he sort of took it away from online in 2017, I think it was. It's still circulating, and some people are really sort of trying to create lists of this sort. But before we talk about how to sort of some tools that exist nowadays that Sonja will talk about later, I think we might want to say a little bit more about what it is that's going on. So some people have tried quite nicely, to my opinion, to sort of pin down what is it that's going on, what are it that sort of signifies a typical predatory journal. And these are, of course, not necessary or sufficient conditions of any sort, but more like indications, things to look out for. Two people who have been doing that is our former colleague Stefan Eriksson, who recently retired from Uppsala University, but he has been doing this together with Gert Helgesson. And at least when they started to sort of work on this issue, they saw that a few signs that you could watch out for, sort of indicating whether the journal is a serious one or not. The first of all is whether it's recognized by one of the professional organizations committed to best publishing practices. One such organization, for instance, is COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. If it's not a member of that organization, then that might be taken as a warning indication. If it's not indexed in such like Web of Science or other important electronic database, that's also a negative sign. But as you might recall from Sonja's email that she shows us, some of these journals approaching us might say that they are quite leading publishers, where in fact they've just started. It might be hard to be a leading publisher if you started 2 years ago, for instance. If it's unfamiliar with the colleagues, that's also a sign. But as you can say, but one of the things that mostly signifies these journals is that they are poor research quality of the articles, because they are not interested in upholding any level of scientific quality. They are interested in publishing papers and then get the money out of having lured someone in and doing that. So if you look into the papers and see that these are, of course, poor quality papers, then that might, of course, be a large indicator at hand. But of course, this also complicates the picture a bit, because they are, of course, not every journal who publishes poor papers is a legitimate one. So this is sort of a grey area, of course, where we might talk more about poorly run journals rather than predatory ones. But also, there are at least some attempts to try to sort of pinpoint what it is. But on the other hand, when I present this to PhD students nowadays, the immediate question comes, okay, but why on earth would anyone publish with a predatory publisher at all? Why would one wish to do that? And there are some studies coming out trying to sort of get an idea about, okay, who is it? Because these journals are becoming much of a problem. Sometimes people might publish with them, but even if you don't publish with them, it might be that people cite them. People cite papers from these journals, and sort of by that way they make it into this to the research record. So who is it? And some people have tried to pinpoint, and there are some indications that maybe people from developing countries are publishing to a larger extent. One of the countries standing out, I will show a slide shortly, is India. Where most comes from. This is not a good statistics because this is just absolute numbers, and India is a big country, so it doesn't say anything about proportions. But as you can see, Nigeria, Turkey, USA, China, Saudi Arabia stands out. But research is a global thing, so this is of course something that impacts us all. Sweden, in comparison, is a rather small country. But if you go back shortly to the articles just mentioned, okay, so this is who publish, but then the question becomes why. One of the main reasons why people publish with these journals is that they are unaware that they are. So maybe they simply are not trained in order to discern which one is a good journal from a bad one. They might not necessarily have the resources, but there are also indications from qualitative studies, and here are two examples, where people have been interviewing people publishing with these journals, and some do it simply because they need a publication, and they need a publication quickly. So in some countries, for instance, as in Turkey, which you can tell from the paper to my right, predatory journals who publish in them and why, is that if you want to sort of complete a PhD, you need to have a number of publications, and one way of easily doing that is by publishing with a quick and dirty publication with a predatory journal. And adding on to that seems to be so common in some context that nobody really cares. So it's perceived as legitimate. It's almost like if you think about gift authorship as another way of gaming the system that Sonja mentioned, that since everyone does it, then it's okay if I do, perhaps. Or at least that's the kind of psychological driving factor. Some publish with them because they think that a lot of these journals are placed in India, for instance. A reason why Indian researchers might publish is because they sort of, it feels much more close to home. That's another thing that is picked up in the article in Learn Publishing mentioned there. And we can. Yeah. So much for fake journals. Then we also mentioned fake papers, right? You want to say something about fake papers quickly, Sonja?
Well, we have a lot of people earning a lot of money to enable not only students to cheat, but also researchers to cheat. And because the incentives, as I have said, are really large when it comes to predatory journals. So, students are sometimes buying papers, but also researchers don't buy papers, they buy co-authorship, etc. So this is also a large industry. So you wanted to say something about these papers, I guess.
Yeah, probably, or certainly. No, but so part of the game in the system is that there's one term that we come back to when we talk about these issues, when we teach about them, Sonja and I, and it's the concept of industrialization of scientific misconduct. What we see, and predatory publishing is just one of them, but also fake papers is just another side of the story, is where someone outside of academia simply gives us some kind of service in order to sort of help people basically cheat. So in the same way, there are people who might want to have a quick publication and they might simply pay for it, don't care about where or how good it is. You can also pay for having your name listed as one of the authors on papers, and that's the concept of that we now refer to as authorship for sale. So a lot of these paper mills, as they are called, that produces a lot of fake papers, do it for financial gain. They simply invite people and for sort of simply offer them to buy a position on the papers. And this is simply how this industry works. Now, a problem that makes this even somehow worse, I think, compared to predatory journals, is that these papers often end up in legitimate ones. That's part of their business idea, is that to get these fake papers in. And Sonja will certainly tell you more about that, given your role as an editor at one journal. Okay, how a lot of papers you get nowadays. And here are two examples of recent articles trying also to sort of pinpoint that how difficult it has become. That these fake papers, often generated by the help of AI, is simply flooding the system. So one of the papers here, systematic reviews that aim to extract broad conclusions from studies, are in peril. That's published in Science, and there's a researcher explaining that he intended to do a first scoping review, hoping to get about 60 papers on the topic that he was interested in. Started doing the review, found 600 papers. Turns out that a lot of them had fishy data and turned out to be rather suspicious about the quality of them. So, meaning that the field are simply getting too much papers just in, and we don't know really what to do about it. And the piece from Atlantic sort of reports the same thing, that science is essentially drowning in AI slop. So it's like we can't really hold up. So from the editor's perspective, it becomes harder and harder to simply just keep track on everything that comes in and whether it's valid or not. Now, of course, what we're talking about is not necessarily only AI-assisted research, because there might be good ways of using AI in research too. That might help us improve what we are doing. But what we're talking about here is essentially AI-generated papers that are intended to pass as real ones and then making their ways into the journals.
Yeah,
and we also, sorry.
And we have a new problem that's actually an AI problem with fake citations. Because nowadays we have a lot of fake references generated by AI. And as you have said, it's not only that we have a lot of AI written papers, which is quite obvious sometimes. Now the first thing as an editor is for me to go and double check references, which is quite boring before I even read a paper, because probably there are some fake references in there. So how does it look like? I asked GPT, give me 10 papers on AI and fake citations. And what did I got? Well, I got 4 papers that were preprint papers. And preprinted papers might be a good thing, but they haven't actually undergone peer review. Peer review is still the only quality mark we have when it comes to science, basically. These papers, some of them will be published in legit scientific journals, but perhaps not all of them. And we have seen during COVID that many people, journalists and lay people, don't even understand the concept of preprint. So a lot of things during COVID came in newspapers. It was published in here, but never made it to legit journals. So 4 papers out of 10. And then I got a paper, link leads to the journal, curious, but to another paper. So it is completely hallucinated. That's something that's very typical when Gen AI is providing references. 2 papers are completely hallucinated, don't even exist. DOI not found in both cases. And then I got 2 papers that are in scientific papers, in scientific journals. So it's very important when you're trying to find literature to understand that now AI can distinguish between predatory journals and peer-reviewed journals. In addition, so use real databases, basically. In addition, you will have quite a few basically non-existent hallucinated papers, because Gen AI is not going to tell you, I can't find something. It will tell you, oh, this word sounds good after this word, and it will hallucinate something. So nowadays we have this problem as well. And yeah.
Yes, and we do, and it sort of influences things in the research ethics context. So for those of you who are familiar with the Swedish system when it comes to good scientific practice, we have a law regulating things nowadays, partly following Macchiarini, and who defines scientific misconduct in terms of FFP, so falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. And of course, AI is changing a bit because I don't necessarily think that plagiarism is going to be one of the type of fraud that's going to exist for a long time after this, because things change right now. People do other things rather than plagiarize. But one of the things that also happens is that it changes the notion of fabrication. So fabrication is essentially when you make up your data. And there are a lot of infamous examples of people who have simply just made up their data and presenting it as if it was research. But some people nowadays, and David Resnick and Mohammad Hosseini are two research ethicists who have recently argued that hallucinated citations, when produced by artificial intelligence in the way that Sonja mentioned, they might constitute, that, including that of publishing papers with such citations, might constitute research misconduct, especially when the citations function as data. So if you think about a literature review, for instance, and a part of the data in a literature review is obviously the papers you've been reviewing, right? So they argue that maybe that should be thought of in terms of fabrication. And this is, of course, something that we have recently seen in the case of Sweden, right? Where we had two examples, and I apologize for a slide in Swedish, but we have two PhD theses where it has been reported in the Swedish Universitetsläraren, the union paper, where they have had fabricated references, and then the National Board for Investigating Scientific Misconduct sort of found that these two are guilty of scientific misconduct in the same way that Resnick and Hosseini is arguing. So this means that this is something you need to watch out for. And I think we need to watch out for it in two ways. Of course, one is that legally speaking, each and every one of us have a legal obligation to perform research in accordance with good scientific practice. But it's also such that for those of us who have positions as chairs of department and so on, we also have, as forskningshuvudman, as a head of department, head of research, also have responsibilities to make sure that we adhere to good research practice. And of course, so this is something that we're probably going to hear much more about and see how things develop in terms of internal guidelines, for instance, in departments and so on.
And yes, when it comes to AI, I already mentioned these citations, but basically what is happening with Gen AI, besides these hallucinated citations, is that it amplifies the problems in research we already have. Because it's very much easier to generate text with minimal variation to get duplicate or publications to salami slice your papers without actually saying anything new. We will have a situation where we have this hallucinated citation, but also more and more superfluous citations. When you have a reference and you have like 50, you have something and then you have 50 references, which doesn't really tell us anything about in what way you are using that literature to support any claims you are making. Predatory journals are, of course, using AI, so it's going to amplify that as well. And the risk of contaminating research with texts that are published in predatory journals. And I've seen texts on polar bears turning into people and Star Wars Force like a cure for cancer. That type of papers are going to be included in literature if people are not aware that some of these tips and tricks they get through Gen AI is actually predatory. Hijacked journals is another problem that we have seen nowadays, where a journal that's not perhaps active anymore is hijacked by predators and turned into a predatory journal. Paper mills, of course, are using Gen AI as well. They are, for instance, using open data sets as a starting data point for AI-generated papers. Image manipulation is, of course, another topic. We already had problems with people fabricating images in their research. AI can do it, of course, in in a way that's very hard to distinguish nowadays from proper images. So the question is, what can be done? Well, we have really a crisis because we have paywalls, we have predatory journals, we have paper mills. They all undermine trust in science. So can we rely on the existing safeguarding things we have, like retractions? Here is a paper that was retracted because of this sentence. Certainly, here is a possible introduction for your topic, which is apparently Gen AI. What is the problem with retractions? We have number of retractions on the rise. You can see here, and it's not going exponentially because in 23 these retractions have passed 10,000, but largely because of more than 8,000 retractions by Hind-Avi. Retractions take time, and some legit journals might not always be eager to retract papers. They want to double check, of course, but also they are afraid of getting problems with their reputation. So it really takes time. But that is one way, of course, that we have. Another way that you might want to do is to install PubPeer. Many people are working for free and have as a hobby basically to go and read papers, and if they see that something, they write a comment in PubPeer. And when you install PubPeer extension, which you can do in Chrome, for instance, then you will have this orange line telling you that there might be some problems with these papers. That's a good thing to check, because you might not want to check, even if it is a good journal, even if it seems like a legit paper, there might be some serious problems. It's not yet retracted because, as I have said, retractions takes time. There has also been people trying to develop different AI tools that can check if a journal is predatory. So they're developed to combat these predatory practices. Here's one of them, Academic Journal Predatory Tracking System. Unfortunately, these tools do not really work. There are way too many false positives and false negatives. We can hope that they will develop in a better way, but we are not there yet. There are other tools developed, hopefully better. This one analyzes journal websites for red flags like fake editorial boards, excessive self-citation, and sloppy errors. AI has flagged over 14,000 suspicious titles out of 15,200, but there were also, once again, both false positives and false negatives. So it's still a provisional tool, and it was covered in Nature as well. Another option is not to create an overall tool, but focus on a specific discipline and use machine learning to identify papers that are resembling retracted paper mill papers from titles and abstracts. We will never get a foolproof system, but this might be help still to see, okay, this might be a problem with this text. Let's see if it is problematic or not. But basically what we need to do is to reform the system. A year ago in Stockholm, some of my colleagues were there, and we had a conference and wrote this Stockholm Declaration, which is basically a call for action that demands reform to ensure that publishing serves science and not profit. We see 4 principles for change. First of all, that academia resumes control, to return the ownership of journals to the academic community, to promote non-profit and scholar-led publishing, where authors retain their copyright, and then have, of course, open diamond published papers where no one is paying, neither scientists nor readers. Because then, if there is no money, basically, then predatory journals do not have interest in publishing. But as universities, we really need to end publish or perish culture. I've started with that because this incentive is a driving force for for all these problems we have in this industrialization of cheating, we should evaluate research on merit and not metrics. We should focus on quality, on substance, and not on how many citations we had. And one thing that is still very important, we still need to keep peer review, and we need to keep peer review away from AI. It's very hard as an editor to find peer reviewers, and we need to do peer reviews ourselves when we are asked to do it as experts. We also need to expose and prevent fake publications, flag and register fraudulent papers and journals, and support people, like I have already mentioned, these sleuths that are watching the integrity. And we need legislation, we need policies, we need to define and sanction publishing fraud and corruption, advise and educate and fund institutions, review boards, and have transparency and accountability. And you are very, very welcome to sign this declaration. We already have more than 500 signatures there. So I think we have now time for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, William. Thank you very much, Sonia. So there is time now for Q&A, and of course, you're free to publish, so to speak, your questions on the chat.